How to build a Blackgates Sweet Pea 5-inch gauge locomotive. Part 60. Fitting the trailing pony truck to the chassis. This originally needed some serious repairs, which was shown in an earlier episode. I called this series How to Build a Blackgates Sweet Pea 5-inch gauge locomotive because that is what it is, but really I suppose if you want to be picky, it's a major rebuild. This is what's known as a bitzer engine because it's made up of various bits and pieces. Some of these bits and pieces are okay and others went in the scrap bin. If you're watching the series regularly, you'll see how much work there is to do. The reason for using a donor Sweet Pea, which was part finished, albeit badly, is twofold. One is to speed up the job. I don't have to make a lot of the parts completely from the beginning. And the other bonus is, if you have a Sweet Pea that's badly made, this is how to put it right, or at least one way. This is the repaired trailing pony truck. Please note I did not drill the holes in the wrong place and use a needle file to enlarge one of them. That was already there. I remachined the wheels and modified the supports that hold the axle boxes in place, and I remade entirely the part that holds the pony truck in place to the chassis. The first thing to do is to refit the brass block. This acts as a thrust bearing to take the weight of the engine, and really it should be made from gunmetal, not brass, but you can't have everything. Gunmetal wears much better, but it's not really that important because most of the time this brass block won't be touching the part of the chassis where it's supposed to touch. Here I've just removed the masking tape from the area where the brass block acts as a thrust bearing when it's required. I'll show this in more detail in a future episode, but for now I'm just putting it together. The hole in the bracket was drilled in the wrong place. I would have started again, but this builder decided it would just drill the holes that mount the part to the chassis, also in the wrong place. The main thing is, the hole did end up in the right place to support the pony truck on the chassis. Before fitting this to the chassis, it's into the outer part of the workshop to paint it using self-etch primer. You don't need to apply quite as much self-etch primer to the part as I am doing, but this stuff is really good and you can apply plenty of it. I could put this down as a top tip. I'm using a blowtorch to heat the part to dry the paint. This is a new blowtorch that I've just bought for a specific job. I'll show more details in an episode of Workshop Topics very shortly. Because it's very directional, it's great for drying paint, provided you don't turn it up too high. I let some time elapse before I painted it with the top coat, and I didn't use the blowtorch to dry this. This is a small painting jig that I made a long time ago, and it really is useful. I built it initially for painting model locomotive wheel sets. Once the paint had dried thoroughly, it was time to fit the part onto the chassis. To make the job easier, I fitted the bolts to the part and then fitted the nuts from the other side where there was more room, mainly due to the fitting not actually being in the way. This small shaped pin holds the pony truck in place on the bracket. It's quite a tight fit in the hole because of the paint, but it needs to be. Also, it needs tapping further into the bracket to support the front end of the trailing pony truck. Here's a random shot close to where I'm working of some more holes drilled in the wrong place. Just another of many on this locomotive. In certain areas it's very well ventilated. It's really important that this bracket and the parts fastened to it do not work loose and fall off. Once I tighten the nuts using a socket screwdriver, I tighten them further with a small spanner. They need to be really tight, but not tight enough to shear them off. It's really important that this pony truck is securely fixed to the bracket, not like this with a washer and a single nut. The pin is fitted into the bracket using Loctite 603, but not on the threads, just on the parallel part which goes through the bracket. And here it is in place. As you can see, some of the main shank protrudes through the bracket. This supports the pony truck. I machined one of the nuts a bit thinner so I could use it as a lock nut. This was mainly due to the threaded part of the pin not being long enough. At this point I turned the chassis the other way up, and here you can see the special shaped block which is bolted on top of the part that I made. I'm not tightening up this block just yet because I have to fit this assembly and it's very fiddly. This simple but important fitting stabilises the pony truck and tries to keep it in the middle. The springs on this unit are very long and not very strong, so the pony truck can move from side to side quite easily. Originally this was fitted using 2 countersunk bolts from the inside, but I didn't like that. I held the fitting in place and threaded it using a 5BA tap. Then I secured it to the chassis using 2 5BA machine screws, as you can see in this clip. The cutouts in the chassis for this pony truck are not very well done, surprise surprise. I was going to fill these slight imperfections with JB Weld, but it didn't really need it. The camera makes it look worse than it is. Now I've reached a milestone in the rebuild of this sweet pea locomotive, I can finally sit it on my rolling road, and here I'm rotating the wheels by hand to have a really good feel at how they go round, and the good news is they do rotate very well, freely but firmly. With the spring stabiliser in place, now it's time to tighten the block that sits between 2 collars in the centre of the unit. To make the job easier, I used M4 Allen caphead bolts, using the Allen key from underneath and fitting each of the bolts with an M4 nylock nut, so I don't think this component is going to work loose. Here's a shot of the sweet pea chassis sat on the rolling road. There's still a fair way to go, but it won't be long before these wheels rotate under their own steam, or should I say to start with, compressed air. That's it for this episode. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.